don't get coronavirus in your heart.
Let's do it.
It's the base. LOSO __G.
Deacon, the engineer.
So, there's been a lot going on outside.
Crazy amount.
I haven't been outside in, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, it's actually interesting. Our immediate area, there's not much going on, and that's pretty surprising. But it seems like the protests are pretty organized. You know, they're generally coalescing. Like they're, obviously Flatbush, Bushwick, South Bronx, downtown Brooklyn. Those seem like the major spots. Also, some in the city as well.
Yo, there was firecrackers going off the other night, and
Are there firecrackers?
son, I don't.
No, it's fire. Yes. Definitely fireworks.
That was
definitely
way
fireworks.
too much, man. If that shit wasn't fireworks, it was an automatic, and we're all done. Pretty sure that shit was fireworks, but it was like I don't know. I didn't know. I was just like, yo, what the fuck? I was like, Citizens right away, and Citizens was like, oh, gunshots reported, and I was like, yo, somebody had an automatic, and then after that, I was like, these were fireworks.
Right.
Yeah. But shit is interesting. It's crazy. I think what's particularly interesting is that this case of police brutality regards to George Floyd has really caught on as opposed to other ones such as Sandra Bland, et cetera, et cetera. I can't help but to think one of the reasons that's the case is because of COVID. A lot of people are unemployed, home, not doing anything. And I think, this is a way of people to, it's weird, but it's definitely a way for people to like get out, be social, feel like, they have a voice again. Because, I can't think of any particular, this is definitely an egregious case, but, we've had a lot of recent cases of police brutality, and we haven't seen the mobilization that we have now in the recent past. So I just think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. Other countries have been protesting, right? Kind of building off of it, but I think they also, what also I guess sparked it was, I think, the U.S. protesting, just everywhere here. But I think like there was incidents that happened, and then immediately, am I right? Something happened that was also related to police brutality in their countries, and it just kind of sparked off.
I saw
they kind of rode with it.
I saw a visual image that said it's the first time we had all 50 states protesting.
Yeah, in some other countries. Although I don't know.
And it's like other countries.
Yeah, I think, again, I think a lot of it has to do is that a lot of people just don't have anything to do. They don't, a lot of people are in the day-to-day grind. So it's like, people are extra mobilized, So
you say niggas is bored?
They're bored enough? Absolutely. Because, similar situations have happened in the recent past, and we haven't seen anything close to the mobilization. Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like, you fire me. What else I'm going to do?
Like the last straw, because people are going broke, man. There's a lot of shit that's falling off people's shoulders right now, and it's just like, fuck you. This is like the last straw and shit.
I saw a bullshit.
You said what? My bad.
I saw a bullshit statistic that said that it's been 24 hours and there haven't been any reported COVID deaths. But from what I understand of COVID, I don't want to call it bullshit. What I understand of COVID is it takes a while before it manifests. You know what I'm saying? So they were like, yeah, there's no deaths now, but give it about 2 weeks before it actually hits. But if in those 2 weeks no deaths hit, then it's
no reported deaths. Where? When? Like what?
In New York.
In New York City, New York State.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, deaths. But what about people showing up, like
interesting,
having like new people being confirmed to have the corona thing?
I didn't say. They just said that it was a statistic specifically aimed at the fact that trying to make COVID a hoax, and they were like, oh,
so we can't really trust that.
From?
Oh, it was on
social media, bro. Yeah, no, I saw it randomly too, but I take all those things with like a grain of salt.
It's not a person.
I always take that shit with a grain of salt.
I don't. Yeah, yeah, it's bullshit. People are still dying every day, and there's been a spike in some places in the country, particularly the Midwest and the South, where they relaxed restrictions, and people really weren't observing social distancing and things of that nature to begin with. So there's going to be a spike, and unfortunately, due to these protests, there's definitely going to be a spike between the next week or two. Like, there's no way that many people are congregating, and people aren't getting infected.
That's what I was saying. Like,
I mean, it's going to be real. It's going to be. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but I think within the next week or two, and we won't know for the next week or two, right? But the next week or two, there's definitely going to be a spike, and that's that doesn't even count in the possible resurgence during like the fall months where typical coronavirus.
Aren't we Deke is supposed to be open back up on Monday? Because I feel like if that's really the case, like that's just gonna. I think we're gonna see probably a few weeks of that shit going up.
We about to open back up on top of the 8 o'clock curfew we have.
You said what?
We about to open up on top of the 8 o'clock curfew. We have an 8 o'clock curfew.
Yeah, but I don't, if you open things up for non-essential workers, it's not possible to really have a curfew. I don't think that's going to work.
Even like that's kind of like way too hard to enforce, anyways. There's way too many people, way too many places they could loot.
Yeah, it's just
or people could loot.
It's more of us than the people who restrict the curfew. So it's like, excuse me, it's like, what are we?
Yeah.
How are we really?
I'll be surprised if the curfew lasts into next week, but it's possible. But I'll be surprised. It wouldn't make a lot of sense unless something really kicks off. It wouldn't really make any sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to follow up. I'm not actually sure like what the proposed opening up is, and
it's on Monday, June 7th.
So it's going to be complete opening, not in phases, but just complete 100% opening.
This is phase one until they see what the outcome of.
Oh yeah, so it's like the phase 1 and 2 type thing, but it's not a complete like opening. Is it? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where we're just gonna people are gonna suffer regardless. And I feel for people because. On one end, you want everyone to social distance. You want everyone to be safe, but there are a lot of people who have a hard time functioning in crisis like this. Like they have a hard time not going out. They have a hard time, not working. It's tough. So I sympathize with people, but it's hard for me to draw the line. As to like where the sympathy ends, not necessarily ends, but it's like, okay, these are the facts, but you still have to social distance. You still have to wear a mask, like, because it's not just about you, it's about other people. So it's like, it's a weird sort of line,
Yeah. Fab, Los, I'm a little curious. You working at a school with predominantly like Black kids of Black community, like have y'all had this any conversations around this?
I'm glad you back. So let me start from the very top. So this is the first time I've ever had a situation where something I needed to teach affected me personally. And as a practitioner, as an educator, you're supposed to remove your bias so that you're not influencing the students who are listening to you to adapt your biases. An example would be like, if you're racist, you don't want to teach your students to be racist too. Well, racist is a bad one because you want to influence racism if you're trying to preach that. But I will give you an example of like if you're against women's rights, you wouldn't teach women's rights and at the same time tell the students, oh, don't get women to have rights. You know what I'm saying? Like you would just teach it unbiasedly. Like you would just speak to the facts. So it was difficult. It was difficult for me for the first week to address what was going on because it was affecting me personally about the deaths of my people. in the deaths of the deaths of African Americans, my people, and by the hands of the police. So I was afraid of like that when I do get into this discussion with my students, mind you, they're 4 and 5, so they're very impressionable. I will be approaching the topic from a standpoint of bias, and I will be approaching the topic from a standpoint of fuck the police. And I don't want to instill that in my students or instill the fear that I have when I walk in the streets. I don't want to put that fear in my students. I want them to be acknowledged of it. I want them to acknowledge it, but I don't want them to be afraid, you know? And I don't want that fear. My reaction to fear in comparison to what a 5 or 4-year-old's reaction to fear would be is very different. And I haven't, there isn't enough time to cultivate or manifest this idea of what to do when you are in fear that I had taught my students. So to give them something so fearful in such an early phase, it wouldn't be efficient to their education. So I paused for a while because I had such bias in the situation, but now I've took the time out to step back and actually like formulate lesson plans around teaching about what's going on. So I'm going to enter with a conversation about protests, what it means to protest, what it means to have a voice, what it means to be a leader, what it means to not speak, and what it means to stand up. And I'm gonna tackle the situation like that rather than approaching with a bias, because I have such a young group. Whereas like a lot of my older students, my third graders, my fourth graders, my fifth graders, they dive right into it because they've had the time to establish a setting with those students. They also had time to establish an identity with those students. My kindergarteners, they have an identity that they believe in, but it could easily be shattered if I explain to them in reality, cops are killing our people. So
do your my fault, finish.
No, go ahead. I've been tippy toeing, but go ahead.
Now it's like, do you think your kids understand? Like, I guess when people refer to race, like what they actually mean, because we all know there's one human race, but like, do they understand that other people look at them as black, not as like human? You get me? Or they're
keep it a buck, bro. I don't even think humans. I don't even think adults fucking understand that shit. That people will view you as such, you know? So like as I said before, I've picked a route to enter this conversation with the kids, and I'm gonna enter it with a foundation of understanding the concept. You know, with kids so young, it's such a concrete view on life. Everything is, if I can't touch it, I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, they have imaginary friends, but for a lot of kids, it's like if I can't touch it, feel it, I don't know what this means. Like, I don't understand it. Like for Santa Claus, you got to give them gifts to understand Santa Claus exists. For a tooth fairy, you got to take the tooth physically, put money behind the pillow for them to understand that it exists. But they don't understand the concept. They just understand concretely. I behave, I get gifts. I lose tooth, I get money, you know? So it's like I have to approach with such a concrete example at first and then step back and just have them tell me what they believe the concept of certain words are.
Oh, I think I know what you're getting at. Yeah, because I taught middle school and high school, and those kids were self-aware by that point. Yeah, no, man, I wasn't sure how I would teach like kids that young.
Yeah. And having crazy. Little kids, I was shook because I was like, yo, I think this is something the parents should be really talking about with the kids. But my job, my school specifically shakes shit like this up. They're here to shake the world up. My job is big on shaking stuff up. So if the parents aren't comfortable with me talking about it, then they can take their kid out. You know, it's like you either deal with how I'm gonna approach it. I just gotta make sure I'm approaching it efficiently and enough to not put fear in my students' hearts about what's happening around the world right now.
Yeah. I used to always worry about that stuff. Just with my kids too, just like saying something that reflects my views, even though I guess I'm a little more forgiving because I'm older, and then just taking with that and like running with it, and then just thinking something very, very negative about like everybody or an entire community just based off like one bad experience that they heard from like me and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, luckily for the culture of my classroom, I've established a sarcastic nature where when you are going to speak seriously, like much like how we have, I treat my students just like I treat you guys like friends. So when I get into a serious talk, you can tell by my tone, by my body language. My students know too. So my students can pick up and pick on when I'm really being like, yo, no, for real. Look, this and this and this and this. So we usually use sarcasm. I've embraced the culture of sarcasm within my classroom just to make heavy situations light on their shoulders as well as mine, because it's a heavy situation on my shoulders as well. But luckily, with that culture established, I can approach a lot of heavy topics and still, like, they don't leave crying. They don't leave in tears. Like, oh my God, we're gonna die because we're black. Like, I don't ever want my kids to feel like they shouldn't live in their skin. So.
I got you. Yeah.
I mean, the best thing I think that you could equip kids with is just the ability to think critically. Whatever you do, I think it just boils down to that. As long as they can think critically, whatever conclusions they come to, but as long as you give them the tools to make their own decisions, give them the tools to, be able to dissect the situation, to be able to think about it, consider all viewpoints, and then come up with an informed outlook, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. I think that's definitely the most important, because I know I look back on my schooling and there was a lot of that missing, teaching people how to think, rather than just teaching them just like topics or whatever. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. Not like necessarily giving your opinion. Or, I think you can give your opinion if they're a little older, like you said, because then you can engage them and talk with them. But I do believe, I think your approach is sound. Like, when they're young, just teach them how to think.
Yeah, fully agree. I think with people, we often do the whole they're young, they're old thing, but you'll be surprised how much older people are just so fucking stupid and just don't have that act for critically thinking,
Yeah.
It's easy not to. Like, it is what it is. It's just easier not to.
It's safer not to. It's safer.
That's go ahead. I want my phone.
Oh, my bad. No, I was just gonna say real quick, like, we all operate on heuristics, which is just like mental shortcuts that we do. We don't consciously think about most of the things that we do, so it takes extra effort to actually think critically.
Heuristics. And then he had to explain it. Look at this motherfucker, thesaurus ass. You got it pulled up.
You said what?
What's a heuristic?
So it's basically like a mental shortcut that you'll do it's just like basic assumptions that you'll operate on, rather than actually thinking about everything critically. And we kind of need it to exist, right? We can't think about every single thing that we do and, everything that comes up. We just have to make snap decisions and snap whatever. So critical thinking is actually a skill. And like Jose is right. It's like, or both of you are right. Like, a lot of people don't have it or don't exercise it. And it's really important, because I don't think it's necessarily natural. It's only kind of natural when you're forced to be in a certain position, but it definitely is sorely lacking,
Yeah. I did want to say one thing, just going back to the whole people referring to, and I'm thinking about teachers specifically calling the students kids and stuff like that. Yeah. That always kind of like irked me, because it's just like, when I look at a lot of adults, to me, they're still very immature. They're still childish in a sense. So like, this is one thing I used to say, and I used to say all the time. I'm like, yo, they're not kids, they're people. Like, these people, they're physically your size. They may not have as many years as y'all, but they're definitely doing way more stuff than you guys are. Right. But it's like, they're already like self-aware. Maybe not in the smartest way, right? Because you're still like not really like done developing your brain till you're like in your mid-20s. But I always find that as an insult, man. Like, to be honest, like, just to little kids, because it's just, or little kids to younger people, because it's like, yeah, I gotta catch myself.
I think the scariest thing to do to a child is limit their ability to want to learn, or limit their ability to be curious. once you shave off that area of them wanting to be curious, bro, they then kind of just fit into this mold of what whomever believes society is. You know what I'm saying? It's like they don't, and this makes me dive into conversations about religion and other things like that, because it's like, yo, you're trying to force these little human beings into molds that you feel they should belong in, and it's not really conducive to a growing society.
Yeah.
I mean,
yo, I want to go ahead, finish your thoughts.
sorry.
I was going to change the topic.
Oh no, I was just saying. I mean, in that regard, like I agree with what you're saying, but it is tough. It's like, you know, we all grow up with certain, you know, beliefs and ways of operating, and it's like, you know, where do you draw the line between, you know, showing a kid what you think is right and then showing them, you know, or actually, you know what? I think I don't think it's necessarily, you know, wrong to sort of tell your kid or tell kids this is right, this is wrong, because they need some sort of framework. But also at the same time, you have to teach them how to like think for themselves. So it's like,
let me elaborate. Let me elaborate on that.
Yeah,
you're fully correct, and what you, it's not a sense of telling them what is right. It's more of an inquiry, which you do yourself. You do it to your friends as well. Is where you just ask them like, yo, does that sound like a good idea? Like step back and really look at what you about to do. Does that sound like a good idea, bro? And then break down the consequences. And they're like, you know what? Now you're helping them think like, yo, instead of telling them, yo, that's wrong. Like, no, let's step back a little bit and think about how dumb that shit is. Like, do you really want to do that? And they're like, damn, that is dumb. And it's like, you're welcome. Like, so it's like,
bro, you're a therapist. That's what a good therapist does, bro.
You're never really telling somebody what is or isn't. You're just kind of showing them the cost-benefit analysis of what they're about to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a good therapist or good guide does. They don't necessarily tell you the answer. They just have you consider the variables and you come up with your own, you know, conclusion. It's like giving them the tools to make the right decision rather than just telling them what's right or wrong. You know?
That's what good friends and good parents do.
Yeah.
And good teachers. And good boyfriends and girlfriends.
Good partners.
Good people. What were you gonna say? You gonna turn it to like some good shit? Yeah.
Nah, man. I was just gonna ask y'all specifically. I was gonna line shit up, motherfucker. I was gonna ask about how your thoughts about looting. More specifically, like, I mean, like looting in general is like, I wouldn't say inevitable, but looting happens a lot. I mean, it happened like during the blackouts, during mad random shit. But just like the idea of like, I guess destroying property or, you know, hitting somebody kind of like where it hurts, where their capital is. What?
Nah, I stole the shirt.
Nah, I only bring it up because, like, I guess I'm more on the side of things where I feel like peace could only take things so far, and I feel like sometimes you kind of have to antagonize people, whether it be with a little bit of violence to actually cause change, because like no one's kind of like ever willing to give up their power. Nobody. Regardless of where you come from, regardless of the color of your skin, it's like very hard for people to want to give up their power. And sometimes it's kind of like, you know, I feel like if you want change, like you got to throw the fucking tea over the fucking thing, or you got to break some shit just to get her. Like, I'm not really supporting, you know, the whole looting and like trashing of like mom and pop shops, but like places like Target and shit like that, you know, or you know, specific like companies, and I'm not saying, oh, go trash that shit, but I could understand that. And you know, sometimes I think that like companies like that are not going to listen until you start hitting their bottom line and shit like that. Because I feel like even just the whole rush to like kind of get people kind of like getting back to work really has nothing to do with safety and stuff like that. It just has to do with getting us back physically working so that, you know, we can just hit the numbers that people want and shit like that. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well,
I mean, oh man,
I'm pussy. I'm not getting this COVID hair pulled in jail when I get locked for looting, bro.
Agreed.
I'm not getting this COVID afro tugged in jail. No,
but do you think people would be listening if it wasn't for that? If people would be listening, like a lot of change comes from after violence, some form of violence.
Yeah, but I think in this specific case, the looting that's been going on has probably been counterintuitive. I mean, like, I haven't seen anything positive coming because it just gives, the other side, fuel. I don't think that's going to change anything because on one end, mom and pop shops are getting looted, particularly in the Bronx, like, on Fordham Road, things like that. It's like, these aren't big corporations. It's like, I'm cool with destruction of property, but it has to be concentrated, it has to be organized, and it has to be targeted. Yeah, right. If you just go looting, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're antagonizing anyone else who, pretty much a lot of people who would be on your side, who would work towards change. You're antagonizing them because, you're potentially ruining lives, and you don't necessarily see the aftermath. You just break the glass, take the shit, and you dip. You're not there for the cleanup. Number two, you get a criminal record, whatever. 3,
if you get caught.
If you get caught, most people probably don't get caught, but a lot of people have been getting caught. And then 3, it's like, not saying that this justifies any sort of police heavy-handedness or violence, but from their perspective, you're giving them license to do so, as opposed to the vast majority of people who are peacefully protesting, right? Now, when you're peacefully protesting and you still have videos of police officers being heavy-handed, then you're like, okay, then you're in the right? Like you're making a point, it's targeted, and it makes sense. Like, I don't necessarily have a problem with destruction of property, but it can't just be random stuff, because the vast majority of people, from what I'm seeing, it has nothing to do with the protests. It's just opportunists. And like, there's even that video in California where there's this lady trying to break into a store, boarded up, she got caught, and she drove away in her Mercedes. Like, it's just goofy shit like that. So it's like, people are, there's always going to be a segment of the population that looks for any sort of, green light to do some nutty shit. But
for sure,
I do agree with the idea that destruction of property, it can be a statement. It just has to be targeted and organized, right? Like, what's the point of destroying shit in your own community when maybe you should be going to City Hall and burning that down? You know what I'm saying? It's like the same act, but way, sends a different message.
Anonymous, get rid of debt wherever those debt buildings are. Get rid of all them shits, man. Go raid them shit, son.
If Anonymous is real, yeah. To
no, it is. Anonymous is real. I mean, it's not like a super organized group. It's just like, it's just like a loose group of hackers and activists who organize and do shit like DDoS attacks on websites, things like that. They do doxing, they expose people, they protest. They were really out during like the Iraq War, things like that. But anyone could be anonymous. You can join up right now, bro. Just put a filter and change your voice, Darth Vader.
So speaking of the video you're talking about, it was a video of her. She was trying to take a picture and act like she was looting, and somebody took a picture of her posing for her Instagram, and they were like, "You're an idiot. Like, you really."
Really? Because I saw that lady with the drill, and then she drove off.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy.
In Dykeman, a lot of the community in Dykeman were fighting off the protesters when they came to protest in Dykeman.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, it got pretty fucking violent. It got pretty crazy. And everybody was running around saying, like, why do Dominicans feel like they're not black? Why do Dominicans feel like they're not minorities? Because a lot of the back and forth that the Dominicans or whoever is in Dykeman, whatever ethnicity is in Dykeman, was responding to the people who were looting, was like, we're not fighting your fight. We don't feel how you feel. Like, you're in this alone type shit,
That's crazy.
It was a very big issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw the flyer where people met in Dykeman, and it was specifically to stop people from looting. But I didn't actually know that they actually clashed with protesters. I mean, if that is the case, that's super ironic because it's like, you know, like, bro, you're in the same boat. Like, there's literally
you look
like,
This is the like speaking as somebody who grew up, speaking of like, well, the and that's kind of like, it's a shame to say that, but like a lot of Dominicans, and I guess this is something that like they learned from their parents, and I'll say, you know, guilty of it too until I broke out the matrix. But like we grow up knowing that we're a mix, but they always kind of, and this has to do a lot more with the dictatorship and just Trujillo's like obsession with white people, where he kind of taught and he weaponized like skin tone to kind of make Haitians the enemy. So Dominicans kind of grew up thinking, you know,
French Dominicans.
because it's just like Dominicans are just Spanish speaking Haitians, bro. And it's kind of upsetting because I've seen like, I don't know, it's something you kind of don't think about till you get older and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because even like now, like I still get into arguments with some of my older relatives where I'm like, bro, you're not white, whoever you think you are. You've never even been to Spain, bro. But you know, whatever, man. Like that shit just stops with our generation. Because I'm on my end. That shit is silly, son. And it's just like you're kind of you're making the problem even bigger. Like, you know, as opposed to like just coming together and like embracing like, you know, the culture here, especially Black culture. Like I'm very, very proud of like my Black and my African side, son. Like all the cool shit that comes out of Dominican Republic, or, you know, dope shit from Latin America, dope parts about our culture and American culture, you know, feeds off like our Black side.
You know, it's interesting you say that. So I don't know, Edwin, if you remember this. There was a time where we went to a party in the Bronx. I don't know if you remember. It was me, you, Steve, and I don't know who the.
Oh, I remember that.
You know, and we I'm gonna tell you about it, Jose. So we pulled up to this party in the Bronx. It was for my student back when I was teaching adults, and just entering the apartment complex, we were already like not fucked with, right? But we're so oblivious, and we could fight, so we were ready for war. If anything were to go that far. I don't know why.
I was gonna run.
I was way smaller.
100 meter dash, bro.
I was way smaller at this time, and I'm pretty sure I would have got beat the fuck up, bro, because it was like 9 of these niggas. But 7 of them were little kids, but we still would have. Anyway, so we go upstairs to the party, and we get to the door, and the guest is the person who invited me is welcoming me in. Like my student was like, "Yo, come on, come on in." And then the grandmother was like, "No negros en cocina, no negros en la cocina."
Oh my god,
and,
man.
You know, I didn't fully speak Spanish, but I still understand what no.
You understood negro is it?
I know what negro. I know no. And I know my nigga. And I was like, I looked at Elwin. Me and Elwin looked at each other. Steve is our radical friend, so Steve was here for. Let's run in there anyway, and shake the whole fucking apartment up. But it's 19. First off, the music stopped. That's one. They cut the music off.
Like a fucking TV show.
Bro, they knocked on the door. They cut the music off. They looked at me and Edwin and Steve like, nah, ain't no party. We don't have no party here. So I texted her like, yo, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm at the wrong apartment. She's like, yo, no, 319. And I said, we're at 319. She's like, I'm coming to the door. She came to the door. She said, all right, come in. And the grandma was like, no negro en la cocina. Like, what are you not getting? So she looked at grandma and she looked back at, like, she closed it like, hold on. You can hear him arguing in Spanish. And then she opened back the door and was like, yo, my bad. I'm so sorry. You guys can't come to the party, blah, blah, blah.
Damn, son.
And Edwin was like, Edwin calmed Steve down and Edwin looked at me and was like, let's just go. Like, it don't even matter. Like, we just got to get out of here. And I was like, I never experienced racism from that culture, like from a Hispanic culture. And I also never not got let into a party. So it was like, I was like, damn, I would have bachated. I don't understand. I can't bachata.
I know y'all did good in college, bro. Like,
I was trying to all night. Like, this is not, but it was just very eye-opening at that point in time. And it came back to me when the thing in Dykeman happened. Cause I was like, damn, I remember a time when we was we was about to get beat up. Yo, it was so many Hispanic kids, Jose, like yo, and they all look like us, and they were just kind of pressing us, like, yo, where you from? Who are you? You from Brooklyn? Oh, this is the Bronx. You know, it's the Bronx, right? You know where you at? How you got here? You drove? Where your car? Like it was just like little things like that, and we would have got dusted, bro. We would have got washed.
Yo, speak for yourself, man.
Well, I was gonna run.
I would have ran.
I was gonna run.
I would have ran.
Were you gonna run in the Bronx? I don't know, but everyone was gonna.
Bro,
run.
I always have confetti in my pocket just in case.
Okay.
Right. He was gonna get beat up with.
Hold on. Let me get the charger.
But man, I don't know. A lot more. I'll say, at least for my family, you know, I'm doing my job. We all embrace that shit. With a lot of like, you know, I guess we're very proud of that side. None of us are going around saying we're fucking white or Spanish.
Yeah.
A Manhattan judge suspended
Parking?
No, habeas corpus. So Manhattan judge. So Legal Aid Society. So basically, all right. Let me go back.
Yeah,
so
please explain. I have no clue what the fuck you're talking about.
People are being detained for 24 hours without an arraignment, right? Which is illegal. Like you need to be arraigned within 24 hours of detention, right? And all that means is that you go, in front of a judge. You have to give a plea, and you can make a case that that you don't need to be detained at the moment for whatever. It's basically like a very basic process that everyone goes through. So basically there have been stories of people going like 72 hours without an arraignment, which is like highly illegal. You know, that's like basic justice system stuff. And a Manhattan judge denied a request to free hundreds of protesters that have gone 24 hours without an arraignment, which is huge, which is basically them saying that habeas corpus isn't a thing. It'll probably get shot down by like a higher court. So I think the highest court in New York is New York Court of Appeals. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but it's just an interesting story, like how the government will try to justify, and change basic laws and rights given certain situations. It's just interesting.
How you even if I'm in jail on the 25th hour, what do I do? Like say, hey, I got habeas corpus, like let me out, or
you basically have 24-hour arrest arraignment requirement. Like that's just basic. And if you don't have that, that could kind of hurt whatever case is against you. Because you're like, okay, let's say even if you have a public defender, you're like, hey, this guy's been in jail for longer than 24 hours without, an arraignment, without being seen by anybody. Right. That's a huge deal. I mean, and we're not even going to the fact that, a lot of people are detained for months on end before getting a trial. This is more basic than that. So, it'll be interesting how it unfolds, but we'll see.
I was looking into ways to support without protesting because I'm pussy. I was looking for ways to support without protest, like going in the field and getting shot by rubber bullets or by canisters of smoke. And it was like voting, supporting, like putting money towards like the Black Lives Matter movements and stuff like that. So I looked into voting specifically, and I started looking up the candidates' initiatives in my area, and their initiatives kind of like sat in a space of one, their initiatives were being backed by non-Black people of the Jewish nation, and two, a lot of their initiatives were focused on the LGBTQ community, mostly like getting them bars or getting them places to like restaurants and stuff like that. And then the other one was like getting buildings, like getting grants for the building of buildings, apartments and stuff like that, not Black owned. Most of the people I looked up, like none of the initiatives focused on on African Americans, and it was just very interesting because they go into African American communities to get the votes, but none of their initiatives are focused on African Americans, and it just as much as people keep saying, "Yo, voting, you gotta vote, go vote." It's like, do you really know who you're voting for, and do you really know the game they're playing? And a lot of their initiatives were fluff with this rhetoric of just mad talk, just mad like stuff you don't want to read because after you keep reading, you're like, I don't want to read no more. Just let me vote.
I feel like that's intentional, son, to make that shit so boring so that like you don't want to go through it.
Completely intentional. It was just like, yo, I don't. It's just very scary actually how you don't know what you're voting for, but you're being told to vote so often.
Yo, that actually makes me think of like what Trump actually did. Like Trump has an app that it's which I downloaded hoping that I could sign up without like committing to mad other shit, but it's just like the way this motherfucker just mobilizes his people is ridiculous because it's just like, so like, mind you, like not going too deep into the story of like or the narrative that's like supporting and making sure people kind of move to that app, but it's like the second I signed up, it kind of, I had to agree to be okay with them calling me about random things, texting me about random things, and sending me mail and emails about random things just right off the bat. But I don't know that even though like, I don't know, man, I'm kind of like, it makes a lot of sense. But
Jose, you muted yourself.
You muted yourself.
My fault. I think it makes a lot of sense for something like that being made, and I'm just upset that it's not like, someone from our community or somebody that's a little bit more progressive doing something like that. But I also worry just in general with like just politicians or even somebody like a president like that, because I feel like he's just gonna amass like a huge following through that, especially a following that's not going to that then is not gonna need to listen to any other type of news, right? And then he's gonna be able to still weaponize that, or weaponize is a very mean word to super whatever, weaponize it after he leaves office and shit like that. But we need some shit like that.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, damn. Then I thought about like if I were to be put in office, or if I was running for office, and the Jews pull up to my front door and they're like, "Yo, honestly, we'll put your family in a nice condo if you do what you need to do for me." Like, if I'm gonna be like, no, Black Lives, I'm gonna be like, honestly, bro.
I mean, it's usually not that blatant, but
yeah, that's what I was thinking about, man.
I mean, the fact is that not voting is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's like people in general, particularly Americans, don't vote. Like that's just a fact. Like our voter turnout is terrible. So whatever's on the ballot are the people who vote, right? The people who reach out to politicians, right? The people who get active and get organized, like their initiatives are going to be the ones that are represented, period. Like, people say, oh yeah, voting doesn't matter, but you don't vote. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's like, and then there's another thing where people are like, oh, well, my vote doesn't matter, right? Which is clearly not true. But let's say even in the situation that it does, right? It's like, oh, you're waiting for a time for your vote to matter for you to vote. When do you know when that time is? Like when exactly will that happen? In the meantime, if you're not voting in the meantime, how will that happen? It's like, it's one of those things where, you have to lead by example, even if you feel like all of your, views aren't being represented. Yeah. It's like, you have to go through the process. You have to at least at bare minimum vote, not to mention, maybe reach out to, local politicians, things of that nature. But it's like, this thing where people say, your vote doesn't matter. It's really misinformed. It's really misinformed, and history really doesn't support that. Like, people who vote, they're the ones who benefit. And it's not like a perfect, no one person is going to have the same views about everything, and no one person is going to be perfectly represented. Like, that's not even a thing, right? But you have to have skin in the game, I mean, I get why people bitch and complain about the way things are, but it's like, if you've never gotten involved, if you haven't even voted, if you're not even having like legitimate conversations outside of, hey, the world sucks and yeah, it just sucks, right? Like, if that's the end of your discourse, then things aren't going to change, particularly for that particular person. So people need to, put up or shut up. And this is coming from someone who, who's sympathetic to people who aren't necessarily well represented, right? And, I'm talking to myself as well, because I'm not nearly as active as I could be. I do vote for local office, but not all the time. Like, I should take my own advice. So it's one of those things where you have to get active. You gotta put up or shut up. So.
Well, there's a Eric Adams, but you can be Edwin Adams.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm pretty sure if you see whose interests are represented on local initiatives, I can guarantee you that particular, either the politician is of that group or that group has lobbied that politician, like they've made their voice known, right?
Right.
And a lot of that, and a lot of it is like, it's not always some nefarious, oh, I'm a politician, I'm a piece of shit, like I'm a just whoever gives me money. Like, it's not like that. Like, people understand, like, particularly local politicians, these are people just like you. They're not some, weird political, you know what I'm saying? They went to the same schools. They shop at the same shops you do. Like, these are people, right? So if you're not going to these people and telling them this is a problem, they might not even realize it's a problem. Like, that's generally a thing. Like, people live in their own bubble. If they're doing well and then someone says, oh, this is a problem, they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a problem. But if no one's saying, problem B is a problem, they might not even know. Like, they might not even know that it's worth, addressing. They might not even know how to address it, so people have to be active. This bullshit where it's like, oh yeah, your vote doesn't matter, like that's cornball shit, and it's self-perpetuating. I don't know, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now.
Holla.
All right.
And
yeah.
Good guys, dynamite. Boom, like the Wayne brothers.
That's the bass.
All right, folks.
That's the bass.